Good evening. I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division, and with me is my colleague Carolyn Ward Bamford, who's the musical instruments curator for the library. It's our great pleasure to welcome all of you this evening for a very special Founders Day concert for the library. With tonight's concert, we're celebrating the 160th birthday of our founding benefactor, Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. And it's a momentous occasion also for us because we're honoring the very first concerts in our series here 100 years ago this week. And there's no more exciting group to present on this occasion, we thought, than this amazingly creative partnership, flutist Emmy Ferguson and Ruckus. Their appearance is a wonderful way for us to acknowledge Mrs. Coolidge's long history of presenting both early music, when this was still very rare in America, alongside new music. And we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about that later. We're so pleased to welcome you all and to have the chance to talk with you, Emmy and bassoonist Clayton Zellert Townsend, the founder of the Ruckus Ensemble, and bassist Doug Balliet. Thanks so much for participating. They're part of what you've described in your notes as a core team of radical continuo experts, and I'm very curious about hearing what that's like. So we're looking forward to hearing about the work of this truly shape-shifting Baroque band, and the tagline that I love is on their website, the world's only period instrument rock band. They've been on a really fascinating journey in the past few years, reimagining early music in new colors and contexts. The role of instruments, we'd love to talk with you about that, and about your journey, which has been very widely acclaimed in the media, on the Billboard charts, and so on. Tonight, we're excited to be able to present the debut performance of your new project, By George. And I'd just love to hear you talk about how you came up with this together.
Well, this project sort of was a spin-off baby, shall we say, of our first project together, which was Fly the Coop, where we took Bach's incredible continuo and flute sonatas and we sort of reimagined them in our own fantastical and crazy, wonderful ways. And I think we were in Ruston, Louisiana, and this was January 2021, I think. So it was a weird time. And we hadn't really seen each other in a while. We had a show at a fantastic university there, and we were giving a masterclass for a set of young students, and one of them brought in Telemann's G major fantasy. And part of the masterclass, I wanted to sort of share with them some like interesting ways that they could reimagine what to do with Telemann's fantasies. For those of you who are flute nerds like me, you might know that Telemann wrote these fantasies that we're going to play tonight for solo flute alone. Solo flute without accompaniment, I think, is the original title. And so normally you hear them played only by a flute player. And in this masterclass, this young flute player came up and played the first movement. And, Elliot was our incredible harpsichord player and keyboard player you'll hear tonight. We were on stage, and I on a whim, because I know he can do anything, said, "Hey, Elliot, can you make up a part to go along with this Fantasia? Because it's all block harmony that Telemann has kind of spun out into this melodic structure in the same way that Bach might or did do with like the G major cello prelude, the I don't have the range, but so I said, Elliot, can you do follow the harmony and play with this flute player to show her where the harmony changes. And that was the start of all of this. We sort of afterwards were like, that was pretty cool. Maybe we should do that with all of the Telemann fantasies. And that was the seed of the idea. And as I was thinking about all of this, the Ligeti Musica Ricercata popped back into my head. Mm-hmm. And this is an incredible piece, originally for solo piano. So it had some ties to our Fly the Coop project, where we took a lot of solo keyboard preludes of Bach and arranged them for our big group. And so we took the solo piano piece by Ligeti that he himself rearranged for woodwind quintet. And so Clay and I grew up playing 6 of the Liggeties you'll hear tonight in woodwind quintet formation. And now what's really fun is we kind of get to build on that legacy that Ligeti started for himself and create arrangements for the other 5 as well. Sorry, that was a long story, but that kind of gives the origin of this By George project that we've got going, that it was all had to do with a master class and then some crazy thoughts in my head, and then these guys going like, yeah, I think you got it.
So as the continuo, the concept, how did Elliot really come up with the idea of creating a bass line? You said he just listened to the harmonies and then created one sort of on the spot, like playing by ear, and then elaborated from there?
Yeah, so if you look at the Telemann works, they have lots of harmony implied. So, and especially that example, it's an arpeggiated harmony, which is one of the most iconic continuo gestures that we have, just arpeggiation. That's what a lot of these chordal instruments do, is they go up and they go down, and they use arpeggiation to create textures using the harmony that is in front of you. And Emmy I think she's about to demonstrate how this, yeah, totally.
It starts, you'll hear it tonight. Starts.
Arpeggiation. It's essentially solo flute continuo. So we're sort of like letting the flute be, the source material is sort of continuo, and then the continuo is added to unaccompanied flute continuo. Do you want to go with that?
Yeah, it's easy to see, we see A major and to say, all right, what is this A major going to be like?
And sometimes there are vagaries that are natural in the harmony, because it's written for a solo voice, solo instrument voice. And that is a really thrilling playground to mess around in, too.
I liked your comment when you were talking about the Fly the Coop project, which hit number 2 on the, or 1 or 2 on the Billboard charts, and is an amazing record if you have a chance to hear that. But you said that working on these flute sonatas and preludes allowed them, oh, there you go. See her after the talk. Allowed them to evolve into new and fantastic reflections of our own selves. And that is, to me, that's a very poetic concept. And I see so much of this thinking in your performance today. Maybe let's talk, I know you just had a wonderful visit to our flute vault across the street. And if you've heard us talk about the Dayton C. Miller collection of flutes, and Carolyn is the curator of all the instruments, but is a flutist herself. And she is the expert on this. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you saw, what instruments can do for you in terms of colors and contexts and ideas and all these kinds of things.
I mean, it was so incredible. I think it was all of our first time to the vault, and what a special, special experience. And to get to do it together was really, really meaningful. And we do a lot of work looking back in history and trying to imagine, what decisions were they making then, and why, and how can we better inform our decisions today based on what we think the composers and the musicians might have been doing in the 18th century. But one of the things that is, I think, one of the cornerstones of our work together is that there was a lot happening back then. There's a lot we do know, and there's a lot we don't know, because the people who were able to write down what was happening were the privileged few, and a lot of people were not able to write down what was happening. And certainly what we're doing on stage, we're not writing down a lot of it. So what's amazing about seeing the instruments is that you get to see that variation and that variability in person. Because, when I go to a school, I'm like, this is a Baroque flute, and perhaps some people would think then this is the only kind of Baroque flute that exists out there. But there are so many types of Baroque flutes, and it's just, that's what's inspiring, to know that none of this is like so didactic. There's so many ways that you can do this right. And there's so many ways that you can choose to express yourself, and that people back then chose to express themselves, whether they had something very ornate carved onto the instrument or chose the particular wood that they wanted it to be. You know, it's just, it can be so personal, and that's what this program and our collaboration really is about, is that like personal love and viewpoint on the music.
Yeah, I think when we think, I think the way we share our thinking about history and historical performance, especially in Ruckus and in these programs that we've made with Emmy, is that you're often like looking for yourself in history, and somehow, you know. So when you're looking at source materials, you can be. I mean, at least for me, that's what gets me so excited, is when I see something that just feels like, okay, that I reached to that because I grew up playing tenor saxophone, and because my first idol was Clarence Clemons. Like, that is why I am going for this quote that's in some book that some music writer put down, and it's these little things that like give us a window into like really what we're going for ourselves. And I think that's what Emmy was writing about a little bit that you referenced. Doug, do you want to?
I'd first just love to say thank you again for, this was crazy. It was like a rainbow of flutes arranged chronologically, and you could just look for a year and say, okay, what year was that? Which flute came out that year? It was totally insane.
And in what country, in what city?
In what country, in what city?
It's like the iPhone, you know, of
that's
flutes,
true.
you know?
That's true.
But I was also thinking that in retrospect, it's easy for people to listen to a piece of Baroque music and just hear, this is all Baroque, but really, there's a lot of little jokes and references, everything. It was jam-packed with gestures, and we're just trying to make those jokes stand out again. You know?
In these pieces you'll hear tonight, we'll hear.
And I will say that, you know, what was really exciting as well is that the collection isn't just only flutes, and we were able to hear actually a performance that Doug gave on the viola da gamba, which was so beautiful and special in the vault. So it was
What ease? You just sat down and it was impromptu.
It's a song he's been playing for a while.
He's practiced that.
Yeah, it's just but that was amazing, because there's very few complete, intact instruments from the turn of the 18th century. It's crazy.
Yes, this place isn't
sounds
boring.
beautiful.
I love what you did, though, with the two composers, 200 years apart. You've got instruments from maybe made today, but copies from the past. You've got techniques, modern techniques, you know, that you're using on the flute, that if you're a flutist, you'll hear, but you're playing them on the telemann. And I love, like, the juxtaposition of the 11 or 12 pieces against each other with this mixture of sounds. Like, is that what drove a lot of this, that curiosity about sound? Like, who would Telemann have thought in these fantasies, let's improv, let's add this, let's do, you know, these things with the flute that he maybe couldn't have even imagined, but it all seems to work when you're up there. But where'd that curiosity come from? The collision of you two, the group Ruckus and you, Emmy, like, it's fantastic.
I think curiosity is like our driving force individually, collectively. Like, I think it's why we do what we do. It's why we play these early instruments, because, you know, these are not easy.
That's true.
They're really, I mean, modern instruments are also not easy, but you're learning an entirely new instrument, and you're going to see everybody on stage sort of doubling in lots of different ways, because they are curious about sound and trying to create sound that impacts an audience emotionally, physically. I mean, Clay always talks about how we just want to try and make people dance. And I love that. It's just, you know, we don't want people to sit at a concert and not move their bodies. We want you to move with us and feel the excitement of these incredible sounds. And, I think that Telemann, he would have been down. Yeah.
What about Ligeti?
I hope so.
I like that you're bringing him to their ears,
Ligeti's
it's in a
amazing.
great way.
You've talked about the places where old music looks forward and new music looks back. And that's something that's very interesting to us here because we have, of course, so much music, and also we have a history of music that is very old, performed alongside very new music. And we could look at a few examples, but one of them was that on the very first series of concerts, there was a 5-concert festivity, and there was a first opening concert with orchestral music with Frederick Stock, the Chicago conductor, Chicago Symphony. The very next night, and a lot of interesting music, but among them was a piece of Bach, Howard Hanson, and so forth. But what's interesting is 1925, the very next night was a program of Old English music with a group called the English Singers from London doing madrigals. And again, in 1925, that's very unusual. And there was a whole varied, festival, as I say. And then a few years later, Mrs. Coolidge brought Nadia Boulanger with a vocal ensemble from Paris. She conducted them in 2 concerts with not only madrigals of people like Wilkes and so on, but harpsichord music by Bird. And then the very next night, in the same concert, those pieces alongside new music from Jean Francais, Francis Poulenc, and so on. So that's sort of our trajectory here, and we're excited about it. But you're carrying this forward in an incredibly cool way. And I'm curious to know what kinds of new music you're performing on these instruments too. I know a lot of you are involved in many different ensembles and in a lot of different projects.
There's a few avenues for that. We have some collaborations in the works.
In February we have a new piece written for Ruckus and Emmy and the Emmanuel Wilkins Jazz Quartet, which is like a 40-minute work that combines improvisation across the ensemble and different spectrum of improvisation too. So Roscoe Mitchell is a very renowned improviser and composer from the AACM scene in Chicago, and
a Baroque flute player.
Anna also loves Baroque music.
And that's sort of the genesis of because he's also he would geek out downstairs.
To bring him by.
Yeah, you gotta have him. Yeah.
We have a jam session.
But this is really exciting. This guy is a master of improvisation, and he's really creating something specific for us. It's really beautiful.
And meanwhile, every Sunday in Doug's life, he's writing music for Catholic Mass in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, usually on historical instruments is usually the band that's playing.
Yeah, it's like large-scale LARPing. I'm trying to feel what it's like to be Bach by just getting into the rhythm of composing and putting people together, rehearsing, doing it in Mass, and next week do it again. And that I just do on Baroque instruments, because why not? It's a lot of fun that way.
How did you, or where were you all trained? And did you start on like the modern instruments and then say, oh my gosh, I hear this and there's that and I need to learn that? How did each of you do that and where? Because, there are more programs today than there were a few decades ago, and there's much more acceptance of it. And, tell us a little bit of your background, each of you. I'd love to hear this.
For me, my conversion moment was freshman year of college. Somebody just gave me a recording of Jordi Saval's group, and I just said, how is this so in tune?
Do you remember what it was?
It was a choral piece. It was Tomás Luis de Victoria, his Requiem, and it just perfectly in tune. I couldn't believe it. I'd never heard it before. So that just led to, and it took me a few years and a orchestra job in a symphony orchestra in San Antonio, before I realized, oh, this is actually the path that's more fun. Clay, what was your moment?
My moment. Oh, I don't remember the piece, but I was in freshman year of college, sitting in the welcome to school thing, and there was a concert, and Paul Odette and
Oh.
Christian Bezuidenhout were playing a duo, and Paul Odette is an incredible lute player. Chris Bezuidenhout, incredible keyboard player. And it was 17th century rock and roll, period. Just jam fest. And I was like, what? Oh my God. And then I got into it gradually and met Doug on my first day at Juilliard in the historical performance program, where I remember trying to impress him by mentioning that I was really into Lachenmann right there.
That did impress me.
A contemporary
into
composer.
Lachenmann, Helmut Lachenmann, and his very complexity.
Yeah, Europe in the 80s.
I too tried to impress Doug when we were in high school. We were in youth orchestra together and still trying. But my moment for early music was I was an undergrad at Juilliard in modern flute, and they hadn't yet started the historical performance program. And they were trying to sort of see if it was going to be possible. So they sent out an email one day and it said, "Do you like Baroque music? If you do, show up tomorrow in room 305 and play 2 movements of Bach. You might be selected for a masterclass in the spring where you will learn about old instruments." And I was like, well, I'm free tomorrow. I have 2 movements of Bach, I'll go. So I went and I walked in the room and there was Bill Christie, and who I didn't know who he was at the time. I played my 2 movements of Bach and he said, "You're in, we'll see you in March." And Juilliard at that point had acquired a Baroque flute, and they would allow me to check it out. I wasn't allowed to keep it, but I could check it out for an hour every now and then. So that's what I did as a sophomore and a junior. And then they decided to officially start the historical performance program, and I took the audition and was accepted to the first year of that program.
Founding member.
Yeah.
They have an amazing instrument collection too, don't they, now? It's just grown and grown, as well as manuscripts.
It's good, but it's not a rainbow of flutes.
And Doug is the Baroque bass professor at Juilliard, so not only a grad of the program, but also a faculty member of that program.
Wow, that's wonderful. Emmy, you play then silver flute, Baroque flute, and what I see written as auxiliary flute. What is that? I need one of those in the flute vault.
Well, it's just a fun way that I sum up kind of the flutes of different sizes. Whether it's a bass flute or an alto flute or a piccolo, it's a way to sort of just do a catch-all of different sized flutes than the C flute. In my head, but maybe it doesn't work. But it's so fun, and that's why it's so inspiring to see downstairs, because I really feel very honored to get to play this instrument as the oldest melodic instrument that we have in human record.
Yeah.
And to me, it's always been it was very powerful when I started playing the Baroque flute, because as I love the modern flute and I still play it today, but playing this instrument that I think we saw downstairs, there's 392 parts to the modern flute, or when Dayton Miller took us apart. But it's very simple. This is just a stick with holes and a key down the bottom. And when people hear the sound of this flute, I think that it has a very different impact, because the flute is an instrument that has been found in every human civilization around the world. in some capacity. So I do feel like it's kind of part of all of our cultural DNA. And when we experience music, and when I get to play it on this, it kind of like brings me back to that incredible, rich and long history that we've all had, not only with this instrument, but also with the instruments on the stage.
It's true what you say, though. And when you say it's a stick with holes, actually, that's how a lot were made, right? So you had a branch fall down from a tree or a piece of bamboo that you heard the wind going through by the water, and you can, or you take the branch and you cut it in half, you gouge out the inside, you tie it with leather, you have a stick, and you put some holes in it. That really is how all of this comes to be. The flute collection is a global collection as well. It's got flutes from every continent, and you know, that's what he believed too, that the flute mirrored our humankind, our invention, our thoughts, our loves, our emotions, and that's why he really collected all of these, and they don't duplicate, because there's so many varieties, like you were discussing earlier.
When you're playing very old instruments, do you sometimes feel, can you tell that? Can you make a connection like that? I'm just curious.
We got to hold a really old recorder, and that was pretty amazing. Like, to think about who else held it before you. I don't get that experience very often as a flute player. I think string players have a different experience.
Yeah, and I really do believe that it's also just physical. The wood has been around so long, all those molecules are nice and roomy. They've got their elbow room, they're vibrating at full capacity. And plus there's just like secrets of time that we don't understand, but something makes them amazing. And so hold on to these instruments. There's these New England church spaces that we've been exploring also in Ruckus adjacent projects. These church bases, that every church in New England has them, and they're like made by furniture makers, but they're beautiful, and some of them sound amazing. They're basically cellos, and there's these rescue missions going on because they're just getting thrown out. It's crazy.
That's absolutely true. I mean, if they couldn't have an organ in the local church, they would have the church base, and so this was an incredibly important part of American early musical history. So there are people trying to save them, even in local historical societies. We're trying to create a database of them so that we know where they are and people can have access to them.
Why are they throwing them away? They're just people don't know
It's like
how
the
to-
violas. They must have
Yeah.
just thrown them out or something, because we
And
don't have any viola, you know,
I
like
can-
it just
a lot of
wasn't
them are
needed.
just covered in 3 inches of dust in
I
the
see.
corner of an attic.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they,
it's-
yeah, that's all.
You know, in terms of reproductions of instruments, I'm thinking about the originals and the frisson that you get for them, but in terms of reproductions, you've said they allow you to find your own sound, but they also give you a lot of stability. And how does that work? What did you mean by that?
Well, I've only played on an old bassoon once, and I don't know anyone who, besides this one man who I met in Tokyo, because I flew to Japan and left part of my bassoon in New York City.
Wow.
That was a fun plane ride. And I got to Tokyo, and this one person in this country who plays the Baroque bassoon, and he happened to have a box full of vocals, and I went and met the guy and played on his instrument, and he plays on an original Baroque bassoon, which I'd never experienced before. I play on a reproduction, and the sound it's so dark. It's like the blackest purple. It's just it's the in the wood you can feel the age. You can feel what it's been through. You can feel the sense of moisture and how the wood is softened and how some bugs got over there and that near where the low thumb hole was, and it was really it's really quite moving to experience and hold it, but it's not a sound that I would want to play on very much. You know, it's just so it's so old, you know. And it doesn't have this aliveness that I love in my reproduction bassoon. My bassoon, I can get so many colors out of it, and I can do lots of things that I don't think that bassoon wants to do anymore, and that's and that's okay, you know. It's really old fella, yeah.
But it's amazing how much it tells you, though, about the sound choices that we can make today.
Yes.
And I did a recording for a video on YouTube of Debussy's Syrinx on an instrument from 1913. And even though that's, you know, just over 100 years ago and is still a modern flute, it was very different, the sound quality and the way that I wanted to spin the sound. So even still, you know, it's a silver flute, it looks the same, and everyone was disappointed that it was silver because it didn't look different enough for it to, you know, be a historical recording. But it has completely justified some of my decisions and helped reshape other ones in incredible ways.
So where's this all going? What's
To the moon.
is it? I mean, a recording. I mean,
Let's do it.
I know, right?
Y'all the ones who could do it.
Yeah, we did record this this album. You know, we recorded this program you're going to hear tonight. This is the first time we are ever sharing this live. It's the first time we've ever performed it all in a row, because we recorded this in a studio last summer, and I've been slowly editing all of that together. We're finally sort of getting close to a finished CD album project. So, you know, you can pre-order it. Now, here we got some cute little cards. Here, you can grab one and some.
They'll be in the foyer.
Yeah, with some QR codes that, you know, will help you come on. Ah. Oh boy. Get a copy. You can just scan that and you can pre-order it, and then when we finally have it all together, we'll send it to you in the mail. But yeah, this is for an album, a follow-up to Fly the Coop, and yeah, well, this
You
is
have Strawberry Fields, is that also recorded?
That's not been recorded, no. Nope, that's just it's a new program that also features Emmy and Ruckus and a great violinist, Rachel Ellen Long, and we're taking the music of Ignatius Sancho on the road this year. So really.
I didn't know about him. Can you say something?
Oh yeah. So Ignatius Sancho was an amazing figure in 18th century London. He was the first black Londoner to vote. He was born into slavery. He escaped. He owned a grocery store in downtown London, and it was a social gathering place for lots of people from lots of walks of life, and he published a fair amount of music in his lifetime. There's a book of songs, there are multiple books of dances, and we've made arrangements of his book, 12 Country Dances for the year 1779. He died a couple of years after that. And these are English country dances. Do we have any English country dance people in the crowd? Yeah,
or
maybe.
like Bridgerton fans.
Yeah. So these are social dances. He has the dance instructions written down at the bottom of the page, which is pretty common for the time period. And they have these really evocative titles, like which are places, which are friends of his names, and Strawberries and Cream. It's a really great title that we have from there. Good tune too. Yeah, it's good too. And they're very lively. They're just full of joy, and we put them alongside Handel's trios, which work quite nicely together.
And am I crazy, or we have the Edinburgh Raleigh coming out soon?
That's another one.
with
Yeah,
Ruckus?
that's another one. Yeah.
Do you want to say what that is?
You got the microphone.
Well, that's a collaboration with another great violin player, Kiergo Gwilt, and These are Scottish tunes from the 18th century that were collected, and we just give them a thorough ruckus treatment. It's also full of similar things as the Sancho dances, evocative titles, lots of characters and things.
And I think this gets at something Emmy hinted at earlier, which is that Baroque music is dance music, right? And I think we know that, and sometimes the music can get a little abstract. So one of our missions is to make you really feel it. Like, so we've played some social dances, you know, in our last couple of years. Like we're just the dance band, and y'all are gonna sweat, which is an amazing way to learn also how this music can be flexible, because when y'all are sweating and holding hands and stomping, our music making takes on a whole new world, right?
We have a responsibility.
Yeah, we do have a responsibility to not drop the beat, and we also have a freedom that is very different than when we are in concert, because there's so much noise. There's so much noise and laughter and clapping and the stomping and the sweat dripping that even more improvisation can take place. And a different level of freedom can happen. And that was Baroque music. Like, Baroque music is dance music, and let us really dance to it.
Wonderful to hear you talk about this. And you know, there's so many of these figures like Sancho that I've never heard of that are coming out now that people are doing research about. There was one that Justin Taylor and his consort people were mentioning, a woman, Mistress M or something like that. They've recorded this music that was never known before, and it's mystery. Have you heard about her, those recordings?
No, but you know, it's so much of that starts here, right? We were downstairs and Carolyn was saying, oh, found all these manuscripts from these people that's never been seen or never been heard, and that's what's so exciting for us, like, about getting to play here at the Library of Congress, where there are so many treasures to be uncovered, and that you guys are doing that work, and we're so honored to get to play here.
There is a lot to be discovered still. I mean, on the staff, we find that all the time, but when musicians come in, ask questions, they're curious about some composer or something, and lo and behold, there's a discovery. I'm going back to the moon, though. Has anybody brought an instrument up to the moon or played up? I mean, like, has anyone thought about this?
We gotta go back, I guess.
You know, and looking for that bassoon part up there, you know. Wait, so you found it in Japan, the part, and it all worked out.
It all
We
worked
have
out.
to
It all worked, yeah. Thank you.
And you got to do that. And, I mean, if you don't bring all of your flute next time you come back, you know where to look.
I know, I just need to come with some really deep pockets. Yeah, you got your eyes on me, though.
Well, so what kind of questions do you and the audience have? Because these guys are just amazing. We want to get a few questions in before they have to go backstage and warm up. Anybody have a burning question here? Nope. Yeah, we're good.
Late 16th century.
Well, we didn't play it. We
Me
just got
too.
to hold it. We wouldn't dare play.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to the concert, but I'm curious because we're talking about changes technologically, possibly in instruments. So do the composers write for the instrument, or are the instruments, which way does it go?
Yes, yeah.
Or both ways.
Telemann was a flute player. He was a multi-instrumentalist, and he understood the ergonomics of this flute very, very well. And what's amazing about his fantasias is he winds you through 12 different keys, and he systematically avoids the really gnarly ones on this instrument, and highlights some of the better ones. really trying to show the differences in color that you get when you're on an instrument that is not built in equal temperament like the ones that we play. Now, that becomes a challenge when we're playing the music of György Ligeti, who was writing with equal temperament and instruments that can play every single note in the chromatic scale evenly and equally. And so what's happening on stage tonight, I will say, like, is remarkable. These folks are remarkable. What they're doing is amazing because these instruments are not built to play a chromatic scale. And you'll notice when we play the 11th movement of Ligeti's Musica Ricercata, which is itself a Baroque Ricercar, it is a 12-tone one where we have to play every note in the chromatic scale. And you'll notice we're all making these pretty intense adjustments on the instruments to be able to do that. But we also get a really fascinating collection of colors in the process.
I would just love also to say something about the Ligeti. That's cool to know if you're interested. The form of the piece is that each Ricercar introduces one more note. The first Ricercar has just 2 notes in it. Ricercar number 2 has 3 notes in it, and so forth until Ricercar number 11, which has all 12. So it's n plus 1, because we don't do it exactly in order. But it's a fun, it's also like a puzzle and extremely creative.
And while these instruments were not made to play Ligeti, there is this, I think, and I hope you will come to appreciate this tonight, that with Baroque instruments, there's this organic resonance that is very unique and special to them, that we're playing with these elemental instruments that are just wood. They don't have hard rubber, they don't have all these technological advances, and thus the sound is just so much, it's a little bit broader, it's warmer. There's this depth of resonance that you get from Baroque instruments that I find very special. And it's not that modern instruments don't have that, but there's this roundedness that lets you really sink into these harmonies, even if they can be quite jarring, but there's just this warmth that comes from these old instruments.
And we know that Ligeti actually really loved the old instruments. He wrote a lot for the harpsichord.
And natural horn.
Sorry?
And the natural horns, too.
Oh yeah, so I think his heart is sort of in this experimentation, and he was incredible at finding these sounds that now to us are, I wouldn't say they're normal, but he's kind of the person who created a lot of these textural sounds that have been sort of put into so many films, so many types of music that's been written since then, that he's the originator of it all.
And these aren't the only instruments that you'll hear, on stage. There'll be other ones as well, and we haven't even explored that, but you will get to hear them all. We have more questions?
I was curious if you would repeat the information about Sancho. I'd like to think about that and reflect on it. So if you'd go through it one more time for me.
Sure, okay. Yes, Sancho was the first black Londoner to vote. He was born into slavery. He escaped. He built a life for himself running a grocery store in downtown London, and he published multiple volumes of music before his death.
And was one of the leading voices for abolition in England. And a lot of his letters between him and Lawrence Cummings. Oh, that was wrong.
Not Wilk.
Well, a lot of his letters were published, and that's sort of what led to a huge groundswell of support for the movement.
Yeah, there's a lot of increasingly more scholarship about him, so there's some great books to check out.
There's a novel that just came out too.
So I wanted to follow up because the program was sent a little bit earlier today, and I actually got to read it. And this idea of starting with the 2 notes and building was so fascinating. And since we're just off a two-concert series of Schoenberg with 12 tones, that was, as put it generously, took a lot of energy to listen to. And I was listening to the piano version of the Ligeti just before coming here. And I don't know whether it was because it eased you in adding one note at a time, or it was, by the time you get to the 11th, it was totally fine to the ear. And I'm curious about whether there was, what the history of Ligeti was. I mean, excuse me for being uninformed, but whether there was any connection between him and what he might have picked up from Schoenberg, or, you know, in terms of his building up to the 12 tones. I think this is just so much more accessible, and it was really fun, and I'm looking forward to see how you split the notes between all the instruments.
Yeah.
Anything you could illuminate further.
Sure. Ligeti was absolutely aware of Schoenberg, studied, understood his techniques, but his work sort of stands as a monument to anti-fascism. And so he would prefer to swing music away from rules and more towards chaos. I mean, to the other end of the spectrum. I mean, you get that feeling in some of his operas and things like this. But this work, I feel like, is, in a way, it's saying, I can do that, and this is the way I would do it. And we have nicknames for all of the movements because each one, it's not an academic exercise. Each one has such a character to it. There's one that we call the Copeland. You may recognize that when you hear it. The Friends theme song, Animaniacs, and the Frescobaldi, the last one, where he goes full 12-tone because he's using all 12 notes. He does it as in the form of a piece of 17th century counterpoint. So you could really believe that this was Frescobaldi on mushrooms or something like that.
And what's also remarkable is this is one of his earliest pieces. He was younger than all of us are when he wrote this piece, and it's really interesting because you get to see, you know, a composer sort of developing his language and the way that he wants to you know, rip apart the rules of music and put them back together in ways that make sense for him, and then you get to see that progress as he ages as well. So this is an early piece of his.
Any more? Well, maybe we should I think we'll need to let them go back and get warmed up and ready for everything. But thank you so much
Thank
for
you
taking
so
the time.
much.
Thank you, everyone.